Okay, well, if anyone else jumps on, I don't think I need to manage that. So we'll get rocking and rolling here. This will be a little less formal than at least the first two, and I apologize for last week. Of course, everyone gets hit with the sickness all at the same time. So knock on wood, hopefully that's the round for us and everyone else here is nice and healthy. But I will start with, hopefully we're at the point where we talked about kind of the rationale of progressive overload and some specificity, and then the tools and the tools being software that we can use to program our training. TriDot and Training Peaks being the two main ones that I've been kind of referring to. TriDot a little bit more just in terms of its customization, but there's nothing wrong with setting up a static training plan as well. And of course, as I think Connie, you might be the only one here, which we use Training Peaks for our KTC programming for people to follow along with. So we will touch on that a little bit today. But first and foremost, we're at the point now where if you followed along, we've got to the point where your software is set up. You have a training plan, maybe. Or if you're looking for one in the future, hopefully some of these tips and tricks help you out. So in terms of a training plan, regardless of where you're finding it, so if you're just Googling any training plan and printing off something static, or again, going a little bit more sophisticated and using a platform like TriDot or lots of artificial intelligence platforms out there now, or even working with a coach, I would say the number one mistake that you can make is following that plan perfectly. And that may be a little counterintuitive to kind of how we want to approach training. Well, I just want to follow, I want to be perfect. If this plan is designed to get the best out of me come race day, then I want to hit everything. Unfortunately, at least in my experience, your body doesn't work that way. And there are going to be ebbs and flows. Even missing one night of sleep, one bad night of sleep, maybe a Super Bowl party, things like that, they will impact how you are feeling and how you show up. So really you need to look at all the inputs from your life, stress from work, family, other obligations, again, your physical well-being. Sometimes you come down little bugs, and even how you're executing on the program. So it's very easy to go too hard in a session, maybe not fuel properly, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit tonight. So basically, when in doubt, always default to how your body's feeling, and then you can make adjustments to your plan as you go. So a plan is a great kind of roadmap direction, but there are going to be detours along the way. So if you can be okay with that, then you're going to be in a lot better position, or I'll say lower your risk of injury substantially than trying to follow everything perfectly as laid out, again, even by a coach. If you are ever working with a coach, whether that be in person or online, that communication is key. Again, I've mentioned it in a previous webinar. I would love to be able to feel what my athletes are feeling, like physically, and program based on it. But a lot of the times, it's shots in the dark in terms of I can look at numbers and they can give me insights in terms of where we should go with the programming. But until you match that with the feedback from the athlete, then you can bring context and you can make an appropriate training plan. So if you're ever following a plan and you have a workout and you show up and you're just not feeling it, or you have a niggle, some sort of injury, it would be better to adjust than follow perfectly. So training plans can vary drastically. And I would say that life obviously is number one. It's sometimes I'll talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we need a number of things to be in place, organized, running smoothly for us to then be able to put a lot of focus on, I'll say, the extras. So, family and job and finances and whatever you need to have organized, that will support your ability to dedicate your time and attention and effort into your training. And those two things, life and training, really need to complement each other. So it's great, having a training plan that is maxing out as much work as you could possibly do to lead up to the event. But if that doesn't quite jive, again, it's not going to work as well as it could. So sometimes less is more, and you need to be realistic about how much time a week you can actually fit in. So sometimes there'll be ebbs and flows in that, obviously, busy times, more stressful times than others. And again, never beat yourself up too much if you head into a time where training just doesn't seem to be taking because there's so many other life commitments you got to take on. Sometimes that causes more conflict. And that's when it doesn't become fun anymore. And usually we see burnout or dropout due to that. So any of these training plans, whether it be on TriDot here, and I'm loaded up. This is overkill in terms of workouts. But I thought I would just use my own account instead of creeping on someone else's. All of these can be moved around. I can drag and drop. If something doesn't work on one day, I can slide it over. I wouldn't do 2 runs on the same day here, but for argument's sake. So there should be some fluidity in your training. And it's very similar for Training Peaks. I can, if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to have a day where I can, I don't know, get this strength in and it's going to work better the next day. Then you can always, no, that puts 2 strengths on the same day. I wouldn't do that either, but you get the point. I would say that we always want to make sure that we ebb and flow our training stress. So the last thing you want to do, especially using these platforms, is miss a couple workouts early in the week and then shove them all to the back of the week. I've seen people do that where their Friday, Saturday, Sunday has 10 hours of training, and it's just a bad idea. Obviously, again, your body can only handle so much training stress at one time. So sometimes you got to let things go. And again, that's all part of the game as well. Now, one nice thing in TriDot, if you're using TriDot, there are these little session XP points, experience points. They've kind of tried to gamify it a little bit, or basically give you indicators on the importance of that workout. So if you are using TriDot and you're looking to shed any workouts, pick the ones with the lower scores. Typically, they're the easier zone 2 work, which again is important, but better to get the biggest bang for your buck and take the ones with the highest XP points. Training Peaks doesn't do anything in that respect, but if you kind of know what your key sessions are in the week, then obviously those are the ones that you're going to want to keep. And you can remove any other ones that may not fit into your schedule that week. And it's totally okay to do that and then just continue on with the following week and pick up the training as if nothing ever happened. I would say if you're going to miss a full week completely, or even 2 weeks, especially due to illness or injury, then definitely want to relook at the program as a whole and figure out how to re-enter back in safely. So I wouldn't pick it up right where you left off again if it was a substantial break like that. Probably want at least 3-4 days to get back in nice and easy, and then depending on how that goes, you can resume. So that would be my quick little spiel on fitting things in around your life. Any questions on any of that stuff? Again, we're going to keep it pretty informal, so feel free to just unmute and jump out if you do. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. Okay, so in terms of looking at your training, one thing or one common mistake, and something I've made in my younger days as well, is it's not just about one workout. It's about looking at the whole block of workouts. So the whole idea of stepping back and seeing the forest for the trees. If you can look at multiple weeks as this is my training block that I'm going to tackle the best possible way I can, that's really how you should be planning your training, as opposed to I have this workout tomorrow and I'm just going to focus on that one. The problem when you only focus on one workout is, well, you got successive workouts coming, sometimes even another one in the same day. And if you're not preparing for that, you're doing yourself a disservice for the continuity of training. And that's really where the gains happen. It's building block on top of block on top of block on top of block. Again, no one has ever seen a great improvement from one singular workout. And the problem is when you go to the depths of your being to try to crush that workout as much as possible, and or potentially not fuel it properly, and it compromises your next few workouts. So if that's something that you're doing, and I see a lot of people, especially runners, when you're finishing a run, I'm just going to, the last 5 minutes, I'm going to go as hard as I can. You're wrecking your success for the next, like I said, succession of workouts. So the whole goal is to feel as good as possible. So still execute well, but finish the workout not dead, which again might be a little counterintuitive of the no pain, no gain, going deep, digging deep. No, you should finish every workout being like, okay, that was good. Ready for the next, because then you're ready for the next. So how to do that, obviously, again, requires a properly tailored training program. So that always helps, or a coach that is tuned in to what you're doing. Second, I would say the most important thing would be fueling. And I don't have any slides on this, so if you're taking notes, great, but obviously I'm recording this as well. Fueling your workouts, I would say, is the most important thing that you can do to maintain your energy across multiple workouts. The reason for that is most of us are on I'll say a standard North American diet, usually dominated by carbohydrates. Endurance athletes, and I'll send a link to a really good nutrition talk we did, I think a year or two ago now. But you're probably going to be sitting endurance athletes, 65, 70% of your intake is going to be carbohydrates. So big portion of carbohydrates. Then you're going to have those smaller portions, about equal portions of protein and fat. And again, your energy that we're burning, primarily carbohydrates. If you're on a ketogenic diet, restricting carbs, obviously that changes things completely. And I would say that you're probably doing yourself a disservice in terms of your performance. But to each his own, I'm not going to try to convince you on one way or the other, but there are no high-performing athletes on keto, or very, very few, and they're not winning. So in terms of your carbohydrates, it's important to know that you have about 2 hours worth of stored carbohydrates working at a pretty good exertion level. If you're not taking in anything, and I'll say actually, if you're working really hard, like at your threshold, and we talked about all those training zones, you might only have about an hour's worth of that energy. And that stored carbohydrates, as they deplete, and glycogen, maybe you have heard of. So your stored glycogen, which are the stored carbohydrates in your muscle tissue, in your liver, in the blood, that will go down to zero, or pretty darn close to zero. It won't go completely to zero because your brain, actually, that's your fuel source for your brain is carbohydrates. And your brain will turn your body off before it gets to a point where it doesn't have, it doesn't want to get to the point where it doesn't have fuel, and then you're out cold. So that, if you've ever experienced bonking, that's essentially what's happening, is your brain is starving for carbohydrates because your body's used them all up, and it just turns your body off. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling. And you can, crutch along at a super easy intensity, burning fat until maybe you consumed carbohydrates and brought them back in. But once you're depleted, it's going to take 24 to 48 hours for those carbohydrate stores to replenish themselves, which means if you got to work out later in the day or even the next day, and if it's a high intensity workout, it's not going to go very well, and you're not going to optimize your training. So keeping fueling during workouts is incredibly important, and I rarely see it, or at least I have to drill it home hard. Even swimming, which is probably the worst culprits I see. I would say out of, 20 swimmers in the morning, maybe 10 have bottles, and maybe 5 have any sort of sport drink in them with carbohydrates. You are burning through fuel swimming quite a bit. You are dehydrating yourself swimming. I know you're in water and you don't feel it, but you are. Exhalation is one of those key contributors to dehydration. So if you're not hydrating, if you're not taking in carbohydrates, you're not going to be able to show up for that next workout as well as you could. So how much? Generally, we're looking at, on the low end, 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. Now, there are athletes out there now doing 180 grams an hour racing. And it used to be maximum 90 based on some of the research, but they're pushing it, doubling it now, which is crazy. So 30 to 60 isn't that much. That might be a sport bottle of sport drink. And again, it doesn't matter really which one. You can go higher qualities and cleaner with less coloring, or you can go cheap and just use the Gatorade. You'll feel a difference probably, at least I do. I'll use Gatorade just because I'm cheap until it gets race season, and then I switch over to Morton drink, and it has a high degree of carbohydrates and it's super clean. But 30 to 60 grams, again, might be a sport drink, it might even be a gel per hour. So that should be the target. If anything, a bottle of sport drink per hour should be kind of your go-to. Even if it's just for an hour, that would pay dividends. So you get the hydration, you get carbohydrates. The last piece in there would be ensuring electrolytes. So electrolytes, especially the sodium, potassium, that is what is regulating and moving things across cell membranes. That's what keeps muscles functioning. So it's not just all about cramping, which is a lack of muscle function. You've depleted yourself and now they're just all grinding to a halt. But even for recovery purposes, it makes a big difference if you can stay on top of those carbohydrates. Those electrolytes. And I'll say in general, if you're using a electrolyte drink, could be Noon Tabs, Element super high in electrolytes. I actually have them here so I can show you these little electrolyte capsules. The reason I like these is I find the electrolyte drinks usually a little too salty for my liking, and it almost makes me thirstier and want to drink more. You can take these caps with water, go down nice and easy. There's about 250 milligrams of sodium. I think we got 63 milligrams of potassium. Usually, if you look for sodium, potassium, and magnesium, all the other electrolytes will be balanced fairly sufficiently in most products. So typically I aim for 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour. If you're a heavy sweater or you're riding indoors on the trainer, probably more like 1,000. If you're not a sweater or it's cool and you're outside, you can probably get away with 300 to 500 milligrams, depending on, again, your sweat rate. If you're not sure, 500 is a nice kind of round number that you could play with. So that will basically keep the muscles feeling good all the way to the end. If you've ever gone on a long run and you haven't taken anything and you get, hour and a half in and you start feeling things tightening up, probably electrolytes. So that could fix that problem right away. If you're a cramper, definitely will make a big difference. The other thing you can do is a little magnesium at night as well, and that'll top you up. Any questions on fueling workouts? This one's usually a pretty big topic. No, still good? Okay, well, I will continue on. So last thing I want to talk about on the workout side of things would be warming up and cooling down. Most of you are really good executing the main sets. You want to get right into it, get to work, again, especially running. But if you can take your time, I mentioned, I think in the last video, use the warm-up to judge whether you should proceed with the main set or not, or whether you need to modify it. That would be the time to feel out the body. And sometimes you feel terrible until you start and you warm up. The cool down, consider this your setup for recovery for the next workout. So use that time to flush all of those metabolic byproducts out, go easy, bring everything down, maybe even a little stretch. Again, we're thinking almost like chess. Think a few moves ahead, if not many, many moves ahead, depending on how good you are. And that will set you up for the best success possible. While we're on fueling, we might as well dig into race fueling as well. So not that much different than training, to be honest. And I would say the most important thing that you can do for race day fueling is practice your strategy. Practice with what you're going to use and to the same amounts that you plan to use it on race day. And I would be doing this at least 6, if not longer, ideally all the time, but some of these products get pretty expensive based on your strategy. If you're doing all homemade stuff, then absolutely do it as much as you can. But training your gut to get used to absorbing what you're taking in while you're exercising, and then being able to tweak based on how your training sessions went, leading up to, and this is obviously most important in the longer races. So for Ironman, that'll make or break your day, is fueling. I would say fueling's probably more important than training, even though training is important as well. But you don't do the fuel right, or if you don't practice a plan, your day's not going to go very well. I can guarantee it, because I've done it many, many times. Halves are, fairly important, and especially if you're a slower athlete, you're still out there for sometimes an Ironman long day, and that would make a difference. Standards, typically we're over, unless you're an Olympic athlete, under 2 hours. You're definitely 2.5, 3+ hours. And when we talked about the depletion of carbohydrates, if 2 hours is your kind of your max at tempo intensity, then you're going to be done by the end. So fueling for Olympics will be important. Sprints are really, or super sprints, are really the only ones you can get away with a little bit. So starting at the sprint or super sprint, and actually for all the races, I'll tell you what I like to do in the morning. Everyone has their own little routine, but breakfast, don't change breakfast. Whatever works for you, great. Hopefully there's some carbohydrates in there. Then for going to the race, this is where I'm usually sipping on a bottle of carbohydrate drink and electrolytes. So I can start priming the system probably about 45 minutes before race start. And then I'll also take a gel about 15, 20 minutes before race start. Don't take it right before you go in the swim, because that may not feel so good. Give it a little time to get down. But that would be priming the system so that you're all ready to go. And in a sprint, again, depending on how long it takes you, sprints, you're working pretty hard intensity, or super sprints even. So those should be done in tempo threshold type intensities. Sometimes working that hard, taking in a sport drink kind of doesn't make you feel so good. Some people feel pukey. So you can get away with just water. And again, depending on how long the sprint takes you, you may want to, or what intensity as well you're working at. Again, you might just be straight water on the bike and then figure it out for the run, maybe grab an aid station electrolyte drink or carb drink or water, but you can probably get through it. If you need a little additional energy, then again, bring a sport drink with you on the bike if you're not, doesn't cause you any issues. And this would be, again, something just to practice. Make sure that you can be riding at threshold or sub-threshold or upper tempo and it feels okay. So least important for the sprint. The standard, again, I would prime the exact same way for all these races in the morning. And the standard, I would probably be hitting at least 2, if not 3 gels. Some of you maybe even 4. If you don't like gels, you can go to solids. One thing to remember with solids is it's going to take about an hour to get those calories out, to get the energy out. So solids take the longest, and they also divert the most blood away from the working muscles for digestion. So the shorter races, if you can get away with liquids and gels, even just liquids, then go that way and you'll get that fuel absorbed a lot quicker. But again, if that doesn't work for you, you're going out there a little bit longer, no worries on the solids. Just remember there's going to be a give and take. And then I would probably be at least 2 bottles, probably 2 500 ml bottles or larger. You could go up to 7s of sport drink on the bike, depending on, again, how quick you are. But if you're going to be hour and a half, 2 hours riding a 40K, then I would make sure you top up for that. And then the run, again, I typically use what's on course for the running, and you might want to grab a gel or 2 for that as well. So probably 2 gels on the bike and maybe 1 or 2 on the run. But that's it. That works for you. The halves, again, prime the same in the morning, and typically, and really same for Ironman as well, we're typically doing 1 bottle an hour of sport drink, give or take, and usually 1 gel every half hour to 45 minutes. And these intensities are easier, so you're probably doing half Ironmans in zone 2, maybe zone 3 if you're a little quicker. But Ironman, you're spending all day at zone 2, and they say the bike, just enjoy the buffet, and I would echo those tips. So any questions on fueling for racing? Hey, Darren. Has anyone else has any more change in the score in the Super Bowl? You guys are just watching that, aren't you? All right, well, I'll move on then. Oh, 40-6. It's a close one this year, eh? Mike's typing here. All good. All right. So no questions on fueling from anybody. You're good on that.
I have a question actually. So I'm quite overweight. Do you think that you would fuel any different based on someone's size? Like obviously I have fat to burn, but if I'm looking for carbohydrates, I still want like the fast ones, or what would you recommend for that?
Yeah. You know what? You can have all the fat to burn. It really depends on the intensity that you're working at in terms of the fuel that you are going to be burning. So if you are working intensely, you are going to be burning through carbohydrates, and you'll have the same experience in terms of what it would be like to have those depleted and quote unquote bonk or have the low energy. It is it's a delicate balance of weight loss and training because they conflict. And I know many athletes who tackle the same thing at the same time. One just popped on the call, actually. So ideally, for performance gains, we want to replace what we burn. And you can do that either through fueling during or pre and post. If there's a caloric deficit, that's fine, but it will hinder recovery depending on how much that deficit is. And I don't have an exact number. But if you are experiencing a little bit of weight loss, the quote unquote healthy pound or 2 a week, or I'd probably even go for less, but everyone has different goals. That will, again, impact recovery because the energy required isn't fully there. No different than the immune system is also a heavy user of energy. So this is why we often don't train while we're sick, because everything is conflicting. So if you work out while you're sick, then the energy required for muscle recovery is not going to your immune system, or again, it could be just an overall caloric deficit as you lose weight. So I would be very patient on it, but in terms of what you're burning, I can have 2% body fat. I still have unlimited fat stores I could utilize. Typically, we have about 80,000 calories of stored fat and 2,000 calories of stored carbohydrates. So again, it really does come down to effort. And burning fat is not as easy as just working in the fat burning zone either, because you burn more energy in the higher intensities. So having a nice mix of everything while making sure that, like, I will weigh myself on the daily, but I'm looking for trends across weeks, because daily fluctuations, I can fluctuate 5, if not 10 pounds of hydration, of water weight, depending on how my training, if I do a 2-hour bike session indoors and I'm sweating like crazy, yeah, I'm down 5 to 7 pounds, and then back up again and then back down. So I do encourage healthy, frequent weigh-ins, but again, I'm kind of tracking it over weeks. And if I'm slowly coming down, then I'm in my energy. I guess that would be the other side of things, is how does your energy feel? That's always the best driver. If you're feeling bagged and tired, yeah, you might be a little low in that realm. And that would require you to either fuel more, eat more, or bring the training down until things kind of balance out a little bit. In that whole ramble, did I hit anything?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. That's a tough one. And I said, that is a battle that I would say most athletes have to contend with. And as I said, looking at it from a healthy approach as opposed to performance and mentally, it can be, I would say, eating disorders and healthy body image is definitely a struggle amongst, from what I see, a lot of athletes. Any other questions on fueling? Okay. Again, didn't want to do a nutrition talk tonight, but I'll include another link to someone who actually knows what they're talking about in that realm. And if you want to watch that one in terms of going deep into what to eat and how much, etc., that's a really good one. I did get a question. I wanted to circle back to pacing. Pacing the cherry blossom. And I probably don't need the screen share anymore. I had a question about, should I crush myself going up the hill and then recover downhill? Should I keep it steady? All great questions. I was going to show you some of the optimization that TriDot does, because it is kind of cool where you can play around with it telling you different wattages to hold at different parts. But I would say in general, you can make up more time going uphill, yes, than you can downhill. Downhill, you do have more wind resistance, which there's a bit of diminished return on effort going down. What you need to consider is how hard should you push? And this is where understanding training zones, and in the last video, I talked about different time durations your body can hold at specific intensities. So for example, the swamp hill, I would be very comfortable with most people going up to, if you know your zones, heart rate or even perceived exertion, power being optimal, but not everyone has a power meter, going into that VO2 max zone going uphill, which you can hold VO2 max for usually upwards of 7-8 minutes. And if it takes you longer than that to get up the climb, then I would pare it back a little bit more. But typically most people get up in that amount of time. And then you can bring it down to your zone 2 or 3 and recover downhill, again, where the aerodynamics come more into play, recover a little bit, and then get back onto your pace. Overall, I'd say most people are going to ride the cherry blossom probably in zone 3 tempo intensity. And again, that's an intensity you can hold for over 2 hours, hopefully with fueling well. But yeah, you can definitely push a little harder on the uphills and make up a little bit more time. Now, that being said, in the tri world, or actually in the, I guess, endurance sport world, we call that burning matches. And you only have so many matches to burn. So hopefully the bigger your match book is, the more of those you can pull. But keep in mind, if you're doing Ironman on the cherry course, we probably wouldn't want to be smashing VO2 max uphill every time. So the longer the race, the more important it would be to hold a nice steady effort. And that's going to give you your best result because you still got a run to go. So that's my covering of pacing for that. Any cherry blossom pacing questions? Pace the first 200 meters of your swim. Heck, the first 100 meters of your swim. I'm going to be doing some videos where I'll say, do not pass anyone in the first 200 because there's a good chance as soon as you go by, you're going to die and then you're going to mess up everyone else's race behind you. So we can operate in that anaerobic system or have that anaerobic contribution to energy, again, in that first 2 minutes, which is why it always feels good to start. And then reality kicks in, which is actually your aerobic system kicking in and you go, oh, crap, I went I went out too hard. Yeah, Darren.
Yeah, Corey, I'd say the same thing for the cherry and the hill question, which is to completely gas yourself going up the hill. You're likely to pay a hefty price for that. So in your bid to go 10 seconds, 15 seconds faster, if you get into lactic acidville, then you may be losing minutes on your day in your pursuit of 15 seconds.
Yeah, very good point. And that's where you really need to be in tune with either your zones or how the body's feeling. So any of that acidity in the muscles, especially when you're racing, is hard to get rid of. And sometimes it doesn't go away and that will shut you down slowly too. Yeah, good point. Okay, any other questions on, I know you didn't ask that. Someone asked that, I can't remember. She'll appreciate it maybe on the video recording. Transitions, I had a question on transitions. Nothing specific, just can you talk about transitions? Transitions are free time. The least you can do and the fastest you can go through transition, the better. Because again, you can train for weeks and months to run just a little bit faster and lose it all by sitting down and dilly-dallying in transition. I'll use the cherry just for the context of this. Obviously, there's no wetsuit swim, so we don't have to worry about that. But as you're running through transition, or actually in transition, I would say the most important pieces of equipment to have. One, if you can minimize, I'm saying this all wrong, I'm jumping around. If you can minimize any changes of apparel, do that. So if you can swim in a tri-suit, swim in a tri-suit. If you have to put on anything wet, practice that. It is incredibly difficult, and it can be anything. Even gloves are incredibly difficult to put on, especially when you're disorientated. So if you can again, swim and bike and run in all the same gear, you will be best off. Now, that being said, the cherry, sometimes it's a cold morning. So if you have something you can just put on over top, you'll be better off than trying to take anything off and then put something on. So a windbreaker, that would work good. And hands and feet are usually the two most important things you want to keep warm. So if it is a cool morning, I would highly recommend gloves. And if you have booties, I would take your time and put on socks if it's a cold morning. Sometimes I've gotten creative and just use plastic bags in my shoes to keep the wind from blowing through. Or you can just tape up those little vents as well, and that'll keep your feet a little bit warm. But do all that before. You want everything laid out, ready to go as quick as possible. So in terms of the swim to bike, really, if you can go helmet, shoes, if you're more experienced, you can leave the shoes on the bike and just go helmet and away you go. Maybe glasses if you don't have a visor, but as minimal as possible. Again, if it's colder, then I'd put on those extra layers. From bike to run, then you're just reversing it. If you do have two pieces of equipment for the run, you can make it go a lot quicker. One would be a number belt. So something to put your run number on. It's a little belt, goes around your waist. That will save you a ton of time, especially in a non-wetsuit swim, trying to work with safety pins and things like that just doesn't work. So if you're going to do triathlons, get yourself a little race belt. And elastic laces will also, or either elastic laces, or sometimes I'll just use those little quick release or quick tie things. You can even pull them off your jacket sometimes. They sell them at running stores and stuff, just to cinch the laces. If it's a cold morning, your hands are not working to tie your beautiful bows. So that would save you quite a bit of time as well. Longer distances, I would definitely wear socks, but to each their own, and depends on how quick you want to be. So that's pretty much it for transitions. Like a good cherry blossom transition is probably 45 seconds to a minute on T1, 30 seconds to 45 seconds on T2. But a lot of you will be over a minute for sure. Go controlled chaos. So go quick, but orderly. Any questions on transition stuff?
Just one comment, Corey.
Yeah.
Same thing as earlier. In your bid to save 15 seconds, if you make the wrong decisions, you could lose a lot of time. So I think about Corey St. George coming out of the water, especially for the women, you'll recall, the day before, incredibly cold. And so some elected not to put on sleeves. And then they were shivering down the road and their body and paying the price in terms of energy consumption. So when they're trying to save 15, 20 seconds, not putting on sleeves or a toque, a beanie, they lost a lot of minutes.
Yeah. So transitions matter for sprints, maybe standards. As soon as you're at halves, you're okay. I've sat in an Ironman tent and contemplated life choices for at least 5 to 10 minutes, eating my bag of chips and being consoled by the volunteers. So really depends on the distance of race for sure. But yeah, actually I just found the gloves that I bought at the hardware store down there that we didn't come prepared for. Okay, general questions, anything you want to ask that Darren would be happy to answer for you. You guys are all experts. Awesome.
Corey, can
Yeah.
you recommend any good online stores for tri shorts that aren't super expensive for women?
Oh, you just want shorts or the whole suit?
Shorts, I like 2-piece.
Yeah. My reservation is everyone has different preferences and different companies have different fits. There's a lot of, I'd say,
I might go through Kelowna before the spring. Is there any good stores in Kelowna?
not really. No one's doing tri-gear much locally at the moment.
I was surprised how little I could find online and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So like 2XU is common. Zoot is a common brand. We do our club stuff through Jackaroo, and it's all right. Who do you use, Dan? You got the DeSoto?
Yeah, I use DeSoto and have for 20 years. So I absolutely love them, though I have no sense for what their women gear is. But Canadian based, I'm trying to remember the name of the online store that is the Vancouver Tri Store. Tri Boutique. Triboutique.ca.
There you go.
And I've they good return policies, good Vancouver store, stuff's in your mailbox within 2 or 3 days, and I'd start there. Lots of name brands, and that's probably the best option because I agree with you, Corey. There's really nothing locally.
Yeah. Fresh used to do some stuff, but it kind of stopped at COVID. Forgot we're buying Canadian now. I gotta switch my mindset. Good question, though. Any other questions? Anything?
Does the Cherry have a good way of making people actually know what their swim times are going to be so that they're not completely out of whack and in the way?
No,
How
they're
do you
totally-
deal with pool rage in a swim because people don't know their swim times? Tell me that.
Yeah, I leave the pool for that reason. No, there are definitely going to be people who do that. I will encourage as many to do a swim test as much as possible. Don't sandbag your time. And I'll say, maybe I'll cut this recording out. I would seed yourself just a little bit quicker. Not a lot quicker, but a little bit quicker. You got a better chance of not getting held up.
Yeah, I found that that's exactly what you have to do.
Yeah. But no, people suck at that. I change about 300 swim times the week before.
Well, that's good that people are actually checking and changing their times. That's great. I mean, I've been in
Yes.
ones where people had absolutely, obviously no idea.
Yeah. I will do my absolute best to organize that. And you're right. Some people will estimate 10 minutes and come back to me with 25 minutes or vice versa. Yeah, a lot of people don't even know what 50 meters is. So that's another challenge where they'll give me 25-meter times or won't swim the right distance. But yeah, expect it, unfortunately. That's kind of the one unfortunate piece of this race. All right, well, last chance here. Be cherry specific if you want to know anything. We do have a little extra time in the pool this year, so there is a possibility we might space out just a bit more.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And
How bad's this hill for somebody who doesn't live in Kelowna? Because now you're starting to freak me out with all this discussion about this hill.
Oh, it's nothing. It's like a little bump. What is it? I don't even know what the elevation is. 60 to 80 meters, maybe. It only takes maybe 2 minutes, 2-minute climb. It's not too bad.
Okay.
Darren's typing. Probably knows the elevation. Yeah, and we're going to separate the transitions a bit as well, so you don't have to wait around the whole day, which will be nice. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the only so actually, Corey, there's a good question. I'm kidding. It's about a mountain. What's it take, Corey? Like, less than 2 minutes?
Yeah, I would say that 2-3
Yeah.
minutes. Like
Yeah.
that.
So do you want to talk, what about gearing? What gearing would you recommend for the cherry for that hill?
Well, I won't get into gearing ratios, but typically what I would do is whatever gear you're in, and it's a gradual ramp up, so it gets steeper at the top. As your cadence starts to slow down, probably hit one downshift, and then you probably have 1 or 2 more downshifts to go. So if you can do that as smooth as possible while maintaining power-ish, that's typically the way I would ride it, because it's not too steep at the beginning, and you can maintain quite a bit of speed up until.
And for most people, in terms of the cassette, by gearing, I was actually thinking more about the size of the rear cassette and the granny gears. So probably nice to have not be doing it on an 1125 for most, to have a 28, 30, 32.
If you know your gearing ratios and what your rear cog is, yeah, I would agree. You have a 28 to 32 on the back. If you're a little weaker of a rider, then, and you can count the little knobs on the back rear cassette with all the cogs. You want to count the big one, and if you're 28 plus, you'll be no problem. Your front ring does matter, but most of you are probably riding 53. I don't know, 38s. We won't go that complex. Okay, well, as we come to the end here, any last parting questions? If you do have any at any point, never hesitate to reach out, shoot me an email. You have my contact. My favorite topic, so always happy to chat. And for those of you that are doing the cherry, thank you so much for supporting our event. And same if you're in the Tri Club, thank you for being part of the Tri Club. Really appreciate it. And we may do more of these in the future on various topics. So thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in May for sure, or see you Tuesday morning.